What's up, friends? Welcome back to the channel, Mike Learns Poker. We're going to do a weekly deep dive. This is part two of a two-part series that started a couple weeks ago. I did a deep dive on playing the flop in position against your opponent when you miss. This is what do we do when we hit the flop? And it's not as obvious as I used to think it is, which is, oh, if you have a big hand, bet. No, there's a lot of things to consider. And I've got 5 hands, and I think as we walk through each of them, and there's very different flop textures, hopefully what it does is kind of crystallizes my own thinking about what actions I should be taking, and it will help all of you maybe think about betting on the flop a little bit differently. So without further ado, let's get into it. All right, y'all, here's our first hand. Ace-10 offsuit with about 28 big blinds. We'll call it 30 big blinds, and we are going to raise from under the gun. We're first in. Nothing too controversial there. You can see that we're raising ace-10 offsuit and better. So this is the bottom of our range, but definitely a raise. Everyone folds, big blind calls. Big blind covers us by a bazillion chips. Flop is ace-8-5. I would describe that as, before we look at it, I'm going to describe that as pretty good for us, not a range bet. And I will explain why I think that. Let's see what GTO Wizards says. So our opponent will always start with a check on a board like this. They don't have a lot of aces. We have all the big aces. It also gives them opportunities to check raise if they really wanted to with big hands, like if they had 2-pair or set or whatever. So let's look at whether or not. So I was wrong. This is a range bet. So let's think about that. It's probably a range bet because, yeah, our opponent has some 8s, 8-5 and 8-6 and 7-6 and 5-4 and stuff like that. It's possible they have a set of 5s. It's possible they have a set of 8s. But we have all the gigantic hands. We have aces. We have kings. We have ace king. We have ace queen, ace jack, ace 10, right? We got all that stuff. We could have ace of diamonds a lot of the time. So they got to be, our opponent has to be concerned about that, and we can be aggressive with our holdings. So we're betting everything. And it looks like we can size up too. So 55% bet a lot of the time. I elected this 33% bet. Let's look at our combination. Ace-10 offsuit with the 10 of diamonds. We're supposed to bet a little bigger. So I messed this spot up because we could have kind of pushed the action a little bit. So I went 33% and our opponent calls. Fine. Cool. Now 4 comes off. Changes nothing in my mind. If they have 6-7, we'll hear from them, but they don't a lot of the time. So with our combination, really any combination of ace-10, we can bet, and it likes this big chunky bet, probably with aims of getting all the chips in on the river. I did a little over half pot, 55%. So I'm betting in the right spots. I'm not betting enough on this board. And the opponent folds. So takeaways. Early position raise. Ace high flops with, some middling cards. Good for us against the big blind. Equals bet a lot, bet frequently, bet more. And then when you get to the turn, we're starting to think about what bet sizings will get all the chips in by the river. All right, let's do another one. Okay, hand number 2, Jack 9 of clubs from early position again. This time we are under the gun 1. Jack 9 suited, clearly in our raising range, toward the bottom of the range, but definitely in there. 60 big blinds deep. want to have some of these suited connected hands so they can turn into monsters. Also board coverage. Board coverage meaning a lot of different types of flops that can happen. And then, like, regardless of what the texture of the flop is, high cards, low cards, suited cards, not suited cards, whatever, we want to have a lot of playability. We want to have a lot of different types of hands that could turn into a big hand. If we're only raising with like aces and kings and queens and jacks and ace king and ace queen, and then the flop comes jack 9-3 like it's going to, we don't have good board coverage. It's easier for our opponents to play against us. Anyway, raise. Small blind calls. So a bit of a different scenario from the last hand. Because the small blind, if they call, you can see their range is a lot of suited aces, suited kings. But note what they don't have. They don't have all these big hands over here. And they got a lot of pairs. Okay, so that's the small blind's range. Now, if the big blind had called, let's just say the small blind folded, and the big blind had called, look at their range. They got all the suited stuff, all kinds of suited stuff. A lot more offsuit aces. So, small blind call, you just have to be super mindful of how different that range is versus a normal situation where the big blind usually calls your raise. All right. 3 jack 9. Hello. Hello, beautiful. Thank you very much. Flop 2 pair. And our opponent is going to check. Let's see what GTO Wizard thinks. Yeah, so it does not feel like a range bet type of board. Why do I say that? Because I think the small blind has, so there are hands they have that we don't have. They have pocket 3s. We could have pocket 9s. They could definitely have pocket 9s. I think we have pocket jacks. They do not have pocket jacks. They also have a lot of pairs. Let's look at their pre-flop range. So they have 8s and 7s and 6s and 5s and 4s. And so they got good hands. They have a lot of suited aces. So they could have 2 diamonds. Note that we do not have 2 diamonds. We do not have any diamonds. So they could have good draws. They have stuff that wraps around the jack and the 9. So they could have some straight draws like 10-8 suited, or even like 9-8 suited, queen 9, queen 10. So there's a lot of things that could give us some headaches that they could have in their range. So we got to proceed a little more cautiously. Now, with our hand, specifically, jack 9, we bet, and when we do bet, we size up a little bit. So I think I played this right because I think I bet 55%, and I did. Yep. So if board bad, if board good for opponent's range or bad for our range, regardless of what we actually have, what that means is we should be checking more often. So if we do decide to bet, in this case with 2 pair, obviously we're going to bet. If we do decide to bet, we want to size it up. Because if we are betting at a high frequency, our bet amounts are lower. If we're betting at a lower frequency, our bet amounts are higher. That's something that I've kind of crystallized in my play over the last several weeks, thanks to some good coaching. So we bet, and our opponent calls. Cool. The king comes off. So let's think about this. Is the king better for our range or our opponent's range? There's some hands that improve dramatically that our opponent has, like queen 10. So we got to be mindful of that. But otherwise, they don't have a whole lot of kings in their range. So again, let's go back to the pre-flop calling range. You can see they have some kings, some of these suited kings, but not much. Not too much. A little bit of king, queen, king, jack, but not too much. So they're going to check. And my guess is we're going to bet pretty chunky. GTO is going to say pretty chunky. Let's see. Yeah, another half pot bet. We could check, play this a little slower. I ain't doing that. Not until the opponent shows some aggression. I want to pile money in here, and I'm targeting their straight draws, their flush draws. I want them to keep going with those hands. I want them to pay me off with a worse combination of jack. And if they happen to have a king queen kind of hand, cool. King 8, king 9, or king 9 would be bad, but king 8, king 7, king 6, king 5. Awesome. I want to get paid by those. So I sized up probably too much. Got a little greedy. You can do it, but I should have gone half pot. I went too big. And then our opponent folds. And we win a pretty healthy pot. So we're starting to see when we hit the flop. Hopefully, you all are picking up on this. In the last video, playing the flop when you miss, the way we think about whether or not we're betting in a lot of ways is the same. And what I mean by that is this board good or bad for our range? Is it good or bad for our opponent's range? And that's going to dictate how often we bet and how much we bet. And then if we do decide to bet, we just follow the rules of high frequency board, lower bet size, low frequency board, size up your bets. Let's do a few more of these. Okay, now we are 100 big blinds deep, and we're in the very early stages of a tournament, so there's only 5 players at the table. And it folds us on the button. And so this is going to be the most aggressive that we would play. You can see here we're raising almost 60% of holdings. This is huge range. Huge, huge range. So Jack 6 suited is in there. Didn't used to be. I used to fold this kind of stuff. But you can make a lot of money playing these hands because you're in position. In position is glorious. So we raise and the big blind calls. 6-7 king. Monotone, meaning all one suit. Our opponent is going to check pretty much everything. Yep. I'm going to guess because this is monotone and because there's a 7 and a 6 on the board that we have to proceed cautiously in general. I would be correct. 42% of our holdings check, which means, based on what we've been seeing in the last few hands, when we do bet, you can see we size up. We've got this 66% bet about a quarter of the time. Otherwise, it's 33%. And I'm going to guess that our betting mostly comes from big hands like ace king and kings and king queen. You can see that here, a lot of the king X stuff. And a ton of betting comes when we have a spade. And you can see that like ace 10 as an example. Ace of spades 10, bet. Bet, 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 bet. We can bet with other combinations, but we do it at a lesser frequency. We just have to be more careful, which makes sense. But you can see all these suited aces. We're just mostly putting money in, putting money in, putting money in. Probably because we have ace high. And in a lot of these cases, we don't have a flush draw, and so they're serving as a bluff. A bluff. Because it'll get our opponent off a lot of hands. Okay, so now let's look at our combination. Jack 6 of clubs. A lot of checks. Almost 100% checks. Why? My guess is this. We already have showdown value with a pair of 6s. So we don't want to get blown off our hand. Like another way to think of these spots that I'm trying to do more of, that I learned in a lesson maybe a few weeks ago, was how bad would it suck to get check raised? And if the answer's real bad and I don't know if I could continue, then you're probably not betting. And so this felt like one of those spots where I just don't want to get check raised off my hand. So we went check, check on the flop, which was correct. So I'm glad to see that. Now we turn two pair, but it's the fourth stupid spade. And our opponent now has some betting that they can do about a third of the time. And so they do. They take advantage of that, which, yeah, I would too. They bet pretty small, third of the pot, which, yeah, that makes sense. And so now with our two pair and no spade, we have no choice but to continue, obviously. Must call. Must see another card. Could hit a full house. Opponent could be bluffing. River is a king. So now our two pair is counterfeited, meaning we're sharing a pair of kings, me and the opponent, and we have a pair of jacks. So we have kings and jacks with a 7 kicker as our hand. And now our opponent goes huge, 1.5 times the pot. And I don't see a universe where this is a call. Good call. Hate it. I just hate it. Another thing that my coach is kind of drilling into my head that leads me more to folding than calling in these spots is that when you're playing low stakes tournaments, people get to the river, your opponent gets to the river with a lot fewer bluffs. So you got to really be careful about that. There's usually a lot of truth telling by the river. So I decided to let this go. Maybe it's a call. Maybe they bluffed me off it. I doubt it. And if they did, good for you. You made 9 big blinds. Whoop-de-doo. All right, next game. All right, shorter stack play now. And we are early position with king 7 suited, which is mostly a fold, but sometimes a raise. I elected to bump it up, take our chances. Obviously, if we get 3-bet, we're probably just going to ditch it. We do not. We get a call from the big blind. And then we get a really beautiful flop of king 10-7. So we flop 2 pair. Opponent is going to check. And now, so I bet a third pot. I'm not sure if that's right. I think this is pretty close to a range bet, though. Let's see. Yeah, it is a range bet. So I could have sized up. But my default is if it's so single raise pot, meaning I raise, somebody calls pre-flop, and then it's what I think is a range bet, pretty close to it. My sizing is generally going to be 33%. It's just how I simplify things. So if I'm betting, that's the amount I'm betting. So we got 2 pair, but it really isn't about the 2 pair. That's not why the sizing was chosen. It's because we're betting this board with pretty much everything we got, the entire range bets. Why? Look at all the hands we have in our range. Aces, ace, king, kings, king, queen, king, jack. We got a lot of bluffs that can improve ace, jack, ace, 10, all these suited aces, a lot of which can have 2 hearts in them. So we just have such a massive advantage that we really get to push that advantage. Even if our opponent had a piece of this, they're going to have a really hard time continuing to 3 streets of aggression. So we get to start off with a bet with everything. Opponent decides to call. Cool. Now the turn is a 6, and our opponent should continue to check. We get to continue to pile on the aggression. I am looking at a bet size that is going to accomplish an all-in for about the size of the pot on the river. So if I bet half pot and they call, that gets the pot to about 19, and then I would have 17 big blinds behind. That's pretty good. So that was my thinking on this spot. So I bet that 55% bet, and the opponent folds, and we win. Pretty standard stuff. Now, one thing I will note here, let's say I didn't have king 7. What else am I betting 55% with? Look at all this stuff. So all my kings, all my top pair. But look at this. Ace 10, ace jack, ace queen. All these suited aces. Bet, 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 bet. Because those are our bluffs. And then when we get to the river, assuming it's not some horrendous card that would scare us off, we just keep blasting off. And it's really hard for our opponent to play against that type of strategy. So don't be afraid to do it. This one we had it. You got to do it when you have it. You got to do the same thing when you don't have it with good candidates to bluff. A card with 2 hearts or an ace is a great candidate to keep blasting off with. And so that's what I would do if I had those. All right, this will be our last one for the episode. Pocket 7s in the cutoff for our 30 big blind stack. And we got behind us a 20 big blind stack in the small blind, and then a couple of similar size stacks. So we're going to raise our pocket 7s. You can see here, the green is, that might confuse some people, the green is we can start to introduce just calling into our range. And then the shorter we get, so if we're like 15, 10 big blinds, then we can introduce a lot more calling, which is not something I typically do. Certainly not at 20 big blinds. So 7s, we're going to raise all day. We're only folding 2s and 3s. And then the small blind decides to 3-bet us. Now this is going to get interesting. They shouldn't have 3-bet non all in. So when that's the case, and the strategy generally for most players does not have that move, in my mind, that is, be really freaking careful. Be really, really freaking careful, because it could be a lot of aces, kings. So when they do this, I'm not folding yet, but I am not loving life. You can see I could shove 7s, but I ain't shoving 7s here, because I think they're going to have aces and kings a lot, and they're trapping. They're trying to get all the money in. So I'm in. Let's call and see if the board comes out good for us. And we get a flop of Jack 5-4 rainbow. And now GTO Wizard isn't even going to be able to be a good help here for our opponent's range, because this is something that they would never suggest you do. Opponent checks. Is it possible they have ace king? Is it possible they're terrible and they just wanted to see every single flop? Maybe. But their stats don't tell me that. Their stats tell me they're a pretty reasonable player. So I'm going to be careful here, I think. GTO Wizard is probably going to tell me to do something I wouldn't do. Okay, so I could check a lot. And now GTO Wizard's going to be totally confused. So now 5 comes off. And our opponent checks again. And now GTO Wizard's confused. I'm going to keep running it just so you can see what it's thinking, but it's as confused as we are. So at this point, after 2 checks, check flop, check turn, I don't know, the likelihood has gone up that our opponent has something like ace king, right? And maybe we have the best hand. And so I decided to start betting. Not much. quarter pot, something that I felt like um, if they don't have it, they're just going to fold. And if they do have it, I'm going to find out about it. And they call, which is not what I expected. So they call, and then the river is an ace of clubs. So it's not the card we wanted to see. Not at all. And they go all in. And GTO Wizard, you can see, is just like, I don't know what to tell you, man. I don't know what to tell you. It's not a bluff. It's just not. I ditch it. So this last one's kind of, it's less about board. It's, is this a range bet or not? This one really more is about um, when your opponent does something that's like completely out of line with what you might expect them to do. I've learned through a lot of painful losses, just proceed very, very cautiously. You're probably getting trapped. Um, maybe they had ace king. It doesn't matter because they hit the ace, they win. So that sucks. But they also could have had pocket aces the entire time. And we're just hoping that I hit something. So um, we'll end it there. I guess the takeaways, if I have any, I'll just reiterate the things that I'm thinking about when it comes to two people in a pot, we're in position, and we're on the flop. And the first thing I'm thinking about when the flop comes is whose range is this board good for? And generally speaking, boards that are good for your range and position, the earlier that you raise from, so like your first in under the gun, or you're, you know, in the low jack or the high jack, those ranges that you raise with are going to contain a lot of big cards, Broadway cards. Aces, kings, queens, king, queen, jack, right? All that stuff. Ace, king, ace, queen, ace, jack. And then we have a lot of pairs too. But when the board comes and it's got, an ace and then it's got two bricky unconnected cards, ace, seven, deuce, king, five, deuce, king, queen, three, green light, we're betting. And when we're betting a lot, we bet less. So that's going to be, for some of you, a difficult concept. So let's say you have pocket sevens and you raise an early position and the board is king, queen, three. And it's just you in the big blind. A lot of people will give away the strength of their hand right off the bat because they will check. And I'm guessing the rationale in their heads is, well, I have a good enough hand. I don't want to get blown off my hand. No, because your opponent has to think about the entire range of hands that you could have. It is possible that your opponent has a better hand than you, and that through continued aggression, you're still going to win the pot. What if your opponent has, I don't know, queen five suited, and the board is king, queen, three, and you bet flop, and they call one straight, and then the turn misses, and you bet again? They're in hell. And you can get them to fold those hands that beat you. Hell, you might even be able to get them to fold like pocket eights through continued aggression. So just be thinking about the shape, what's the word I'm looking for? Think about how the board looks relative to your range and your opponent's range. And then if it crushes your range, bet a lot and bet smaller. And if the board is good for your opponent's range, then we're betting less frequently. And when we do bet, size up your bets. And I think those are my takeaways for the day. So we'll stop there. Thanks for stopping by. Hope this deep dive was helpful. See y'all next time.